My name is Bridget, and I'm 34 years old. I never imagined I'd become a widow. 3 months ago, I lost my husband of 11 years, Adam, to a sudden aneurysm. Just days after his funeral, I forced myself to attend my nephew Lucas's first birthday party, only for my sister Cassandra to drop a bombshell. She announced that Lucas was actually Adam's son and produced a will, claiming half of my $800,000 home. What she didn't realize was why I could barely contain my laughter. Adam and I had met 12 years earlier at a charity auction benefiting children with cancer. I was volunteering, helping arrange the silent auction items, when he outbid everyone for a painting I had admired all evening. It was a watercolor of the Boston skyline at sunset, brilliant oranges and purples melting into the harbor. After winning, he walked straight over to me and handed it over. "I noticed you watching this all night," he said with a smile that made the corners of his blue eyes crinkle. "I think it belongs with you." That was Adam. Thoughtful, observant, generous to a fault. I fell for him instantly. We went on our first date the very next evening, and it felt as though we had known each other our whole lives. He was a corporate attorney, brilliant yet humble, the kind of man who remembered the names of the waitstaff and asked sincere questions about their lives. 8 months later, he proposed by the harbor, the real skyline reflecting the same sunset hues as the painting that first brought us together. Soon after our first anniversary, we bought a Victorian home in Beacon Hill. At $800,000, it was a stretch, but Adam had just made partner at his firm, and I was building a strong reputation as an interior designer. The house needed work, but it had good bones, soaring ceilings, and a little garden out back, where I pictured our future children playing. Those children never came, though not for lack of trying. For years we charted, planned, and hoped. Then came the doctors, the tests, and the procedures. 4 grueling rounds of IVF that drained not only our savings, but also our spirits. I can still recall that last failed attempt, the silent drive home from the clinic, Adam's hand reaching across the console to hold mine. Neither of us spoke, because we both knew that chapter had ended. "We can still have a beautiful life," Adam said that night as we sat on the porch swing. "You and me, that is enough." And he meant it. Slowly, we rebuilt our dreams. We traveled the world and poured our energy into our careers. Together, we renovated the house room by room until it became the showcase I had always envisioned. Adam was my rock when I decided to launch my own interior design firm. Our life was full, different than we once imagined, but no less rich. Always lingering at the edges of our happiness, however, was my younger sister, Cassandra. At 30, Cassandra was 4 years my junior and forever the wild child of the family. While I dedicated myself to studying design and building a business, she drifted from job to job and relationship to relationship. Our parents worried constantly about her, often making excuses for her reckless choices and bailing her out of one financial mess after another. My relationship with Cassandra had always been complicated. She was stunning, with an effortless charm that drew people in. But beneath her beauty was a relentless streak of competition. Whenever I accomplished something, she seemed determined to overshadow it. When I began dating Adam, she suddenly became infatuated with law students. When we bought our home, she complained endlessly about her apartment, fishing for help from our parents to upgrade her own. It was exhausting. Yet Adam always reminded me, "She's your only sister. Family is important." 2 years ago, Cassandra began dating Tyler, a bartender she had met during a night out with friends. He was ruggedly handsome, tattooed from wrist to shoulder, and rode a motorcycle that our parents disapproved of instantly. Their relationship was as volatile as it was passionate, loud breakups followed by dramatic reconciliations. Then, at Thanksgiving dinner the year before Adam died, she made her announcement. She was pregnant. It was unexpected, to say the least. Cassandra had never shown the slightest interest in having children. In fact, she often mocked my longing for a family, dismissing it as me caving to societal expectations. Yet there she was, standing at Thanksgiving with theatrical tears and grand declarations about the miracle of life. I felt a sharp sting of jealousy. After all our struggles, all the heartbreak Adam and I endured, Cassandra had stumbled into the very thing we had desperately wanted. Still, I swallowed my envy. I chose instead to be genuinely happy for her, determined to be the best aunt possible to her child. Lucas was born a healthy 8 pounds, 4 ounces. I arrived at the hospital with flowers and a handmade blanket I had spent months knitting. From the beginning, Cassandra seemed overwhelmed by motherhood, often calling me in tears over Lucas's colic or her sheer exhaustion. I stepped in whenever I could, sometimes even keeping Lucas overnight so she could finally rest. Adam, however, was less involved than I was. At the time, I believed it was because of our own infertility struggles, that holding or bonding with a baby who wasn't ours might be too painful for him. He was always polite and kind whenever Cassandra brought Lucas over, but he kept a certain distance. Back then, I never thought to question it. Then came that terrible Tuesday morning. Adam mentioned a headache before leaving for work. I urged him to stay home, but he had an important client meeting. "Just a migraine," he insisted, kissing me goodbye. "I'll call you after the meeting." That call never came. Instead, the phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The hospital. By the time I arrived, he was already gone. "Brain aneurysm," the doctor explained. Nothing could have been done. He was only 36. The days that followed blurred into a haze of arrangements and grief. Strangely, Cassandra was absent through most of it, sending text messages about Lucas being sick or not finding a babysitter. When she did show up at the funeral, she stayed only briefly, keeping to herself and slipping out before the reception. At the time, I was too numb to question it. A week after we laid Adam to rest, it was time for Lucas's first birthday. The last thing I wanted was to attend a children's party, but family obligations pressed hard. "Adam would want you to go," my mother reminded me during one of her daily check-ins. "He always said, 'Family comes first.'" So, I found myself driving to Cassandra's small rental house in a run-down part of town. On the passenger seat sat a neatly wrapped gift, though my reflection in the window showed dark circles under my eyes that no concealer could disguise. I hadn't truly slept since Adam died. Most nights were spent staring at his empty side of the bed, reaching for a warmth that would never return. I parked behind a long row of cars and forced myself to take several deep breaths before stepping out, gift in hand. No one should have to fake happiness this soon after losing their husband, I thought. Still, I forced a smile and knocked on the door. Cassandra's friend Jenna answered. Her eyes flickered with surprise when she saw me. "Oh, Bridget, you made it," she said, her tone strangely strained. She glanced over her shoulder before stepping aside. "Come in. Everyone's in the backyard." The small house was dressed up with blue balloons and streamers, a cheerful "Happy First Birthday, Lucas" banner stretched across the living room wall. In the kitchen, a cluster of unfamiliar faces whispered among themselves, their voices cutting off the moment I walked by. Their eyes followed me as I continued toward the backyard. Outside, more guests stood in loose circles, plastic cups in hand. At a picnic table, my parents sat stiffly, both looking distinctly uncomfortable. The moment my father spotted me, he rose quickly, relief written across his face. "Bridget," he said, pulling me into an embrace. "We weren't sure you would come." "Of course I came," I replied, setting the wrapped gift on the designated table. "Where's the birthday boy?" "With Cassandra," my mother answered, though she avoided my gaze. "They should be out soon for the cake." I mingled awkwardly, offering polite smiles, deflecting condolences, and brushing off questions about how I was holding up. Everywhere I went, conversations seemed to stall, replaced by uneasy silence. I told myself it was just the awkwardness of people not knowing how to behave around a freshly widowed woman. After 30 strained minutes, Cassandra finally emerged from the house, Lucas perched on her hip. She wore a new dress I'd never seen before, her hair freshly highlighted, shimmering in the sunlight. Lucas, in a tiny button-up shirt and bow tie, looked irresistibly cute, his chubby legs kicking with delight at the sudden attention. Cassandra barely acknowledged me as she settled Lucas into his high chair. She moved through the yard with a strange energy, giddy, confident, almost theatrical. Then she tapped a plastic spoon against her cup, the sharp clink drawing everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Lucas's special day," she began, her voice carrying across the yard. "This past year has been full of surprises and challenges, as many of you know." Guests exchanged wary glances. My mother suddenly found her shoes fascinating. "I've been keeping a secret," Cassandra continued, resting one hand gently on Lucas's head. "One that I can no longer hide, especially after recent events." A chill slid down my spine. Something was terribly wrong. "Lucas is not Tyler's son," she announced, her eyes locking onto mine across the yard. "He is Adam's." The world stopped. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Beside me, I felt my father stiffen, but it was all drowned out by the roar in my ears. "Bridget's husband and I had a brief affair 2 years ago," Cassandra went on, her voice unnervingly steady, almost rehearsed. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness for both of us. We never meant to hurt anyone, but these things happen." I stood frozen, numb. My sister was standing in front of our family and friends, calmly claiming she had slept with my husband, that her son, the nephew I had loved and cared for, was actually Adam's child. It was so outrageous, so grotesquely absurd, that I felt laughter bubbling up in my throat. But Cassandra wasn't finished. With deliberate slowness, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "Adam knew the truth about Lucas. Before he died, he updated his will," she declared, holding the document high for all to see. "He wanted his son to be provided for. This will states that half of the house Adam and Bridget owned should go to Lucas as his biological child." Every eye in the yard shifted to me. I could feel the pity, the morbid curiosity, the discomfort radiating from the crowd. My parents sat pale and stricken, my father half rising as if torn between outrage and helplessness. And then, much to everyone's surprise, including my own, I felt a smile tug at my lips. Not a smile of joy, but the involuntary kind that comes when a lie is so spectacularly absurd it borders on comedy. I pressed my lips together, fighting to keep the laughter from spilling out. "Oh, I see," I said at last, my voice calm, measured. I lifted a cup of water, taking a deliberate sip to steady myself, to suppress the urge to laugh in my sister's face. "May I see this will, Cassandra?" For the first time, her confidence wavered. She had clearly not expected composure, let alone curiosity. After a pause, she walked over and handed me the paper, a single typed page bearing what appeared to be Adam's signature scrawled across the bottom. I scanned the document quickly, and the flaws jumped out immediately. The language was off, nothing like the precise legal phrasing I had seen in the contracts Adam brought home. And the signature, while close, was an obvious forgery. The connecting stroke between the A and D was wrong, the final flourish far too dramatic. I folded the paper carefully and handed it back. "Thank you for sharing this with me. I think I need to go now." "That's it?" Cassandra asked, her voice edged with confusion. "You're not going to say anything else?" "Not right now," I replied evenly, slipping my purse over my shoulder. "This is Lucas's day. We can discuss this privately later." I hugged my stunned parents goodbye, promising to call them soon, and walked out to my car. Behind me, I could hear the murmurs, the brittle fragments of conversation, the birthday atmosphere shattered beyond repair. Once inside my car, shielded from their eyes, the laughter finally broke free. It began as a small, choked sound, then grew until I was shaking, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of joy, but something far stranger: grief, anger, and incredulous disbelief at my sister's audacity. Because there was something Cassandra didn't know, something Adam and I had never told anyone, something that made her entire lie not just cruel, but impossible. The truth about Adam and Cassandra began 3 years earlier, long before Lucas was conceived. We had invited my sister over to celebrate her new job at a marketing firm, her longest stretch of employment yet. Adam had made his famous lasagna, and we opened a good bottle of wine. It was a pleasant evening until I stepped away to take a work call from a client in the middle of a design emergency. The call dragged on nearly 20 minutes as I talked a wealthy client through rehanging artwork in his foyer. When I returned, the mood had shifted. Adam sat stiffly at the table, and Cassandra had moved closer, her hand resting lightly on his arm as she laughed at something I hadn't heard. I brushed it off at the time. Cassandra had always been overly affectionate, and the wine had been flowing. But later that night, as Adam and I prepared for bed, I noticed how unsettled he seemed. He sat on the edge of the mattress, his expression grave. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly. "I don't want it to cause problems between you and your sister, but I also don't want to keep secrets from you." He explained that while I was on the phone, Cassandra had made a pass at him. Nothing dramatic, just sly, inappropriate remarks about how lucky I was to have him, followed by the suggestion that he deserved someone who could truly appreciate him. When he rejected her, she brushed it off with a laugh, claiming it was only a joke, and that he was being overly sensitive if he thought she was serious. I was hurt, though not entirely surprised. Cassandra had always pushed boundaries. We agreed to dismiss it as an isolated lapse. Too much wine, her competitive streak getting the better of her. But it didn't end there. Over the next few months, Cassandra's behavior escalated. She found excuses to touch Adam whenever I wasn't looking. She sent text messages that blurred the line between playful and flirtatious. Once, she even showed up unannounced at his office, inviting him to lunch. Each time, Adam held firm, rejecting her advances and immediately telling me what had happened. After the office incident, we confronted my parents. The conversation went disastrously. They insisted Adam was misinterpreting her friendliness, that Cassandra simply admired him as an older brother figure. My mother, with good intentions but terrible judgment, even suggested that perhaps Adam was exaggerating because he felt flattered by her attention. That night, Adam and I made a choice. We would quietly create distance from Cassandra without igniting a family rift. We declined invitations where she would be present, avoided being alone with her, and, after one particularly suggestive late-night text, Adam blocked her number altogether. Then came the medical issue that changed everything. Adam had been experiencing persistent pain and finally went to see a urologist. The diagnosis: a varicocele, an enlargement of veins in the scrotum that required surgery. The procedure itself went smoothly, but there was a complication. Because of the severity of the condition and the likelihood of recurrence, the doctor recommended performing a vasectomy during the same operation. It was a devastating decision, given our struggles with infertility, but we agreed it was necessary for Adam's health. The vasectomy was done 2 years before Lucas was even conceived. We never shared this with anyone. After years of invasive questions about why we had no children, Adam and I had learned to guard our privacy fiercely. The only people who knew the truth were Adam, me, and his doctors. After the surgery, as Adam recovered, he made a prediction that struck me as paranoid at the time. Sitting in our garden with an ice pack discreetly balanced on his lap, he said, "Cassandra isn't done. I have a feeling she might try something more drastic one day. Bee. I laughed it off, but Adam's expression stayed serious. The following week, he scheduled an appointment with our family attorney, James Wilson. I went with him, listening as Adam laid out Cassandra's behavior along with the details of his surgery. James advised caution. Document everything, he said. The advances, the medical records confirming the vasectomy, even her texts and emails. You never know what might become relevant. Better to have it and never need it than wish you did. We took his advice. Together, we created a file that held every piece of evidence: Cassandra's messages, medical reports, even Adam's own written account of her attempts. At James's urging, Adam also updated his will through proper legal channels, ensuring everything would pass to me should anything happen. James kept certified copies, while the originals went into a safety deposit box at our bank. Just in case, Adam said as we closed the box with a metallic snap. Though I fully intend to be around to handle Cassandra's nonsense for another 50 years. The morning after Lucas's birthday party, I drove straight to the bank. The manager, who had known Adam and me for years, greeted me with solemn condolences before leading me to the vault. Alone in the quiet viewing room, I slid the deposit box from its slot and placed it on the table before me. Inside lay the collection Adam had once jokingly called our disaster preparation kit. Inside was everything I needed. Adam's legitimate will, notarized and properly executed, left everything to me. There were also the medical records documenting his vasectomy 2 years before Lucas was conceived, proof that it was biologically impossible for him to be the father. A journal Adam had kept detailed every inappropriate encounter with Cassandra, complete with dates, times, and direct quotes, alongside printed copies of the text messages she had sent. Finally, there was a letter from our attorney, confirming he had witnessed Adam's true will and stood ready to verify its authenticity. At the very bottom of the box lay a sealed envelope, my name written across it in Adam's familiar hand. My fingers trembled as I opened it and began to read. My dearest Bridget, if you are reading this, something has happened to me, and you've needed these documents. I pray it is many years from now when we are old and gray, and Cassandra's antics are nothing more than a memory we laugh about. But if not, if the worst has come, and she has tried to hurt you in my absence, please know that I tried to prepare for every possibility. Use these papers to protect yourself. I know how deeply you value family, how fiercely loyal you are to those you love. But you deserve protection from anyone who would take advantage of that beautiful heart of yours. I love you beyond words, beyond time. Whatever happens, never doubt that. Adam. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face. Even from beyond the grave, I could feel Adam's love and protection surrounding me. My practical, thoughtful husband had anticipated this. Not the exact scenario, perhaps, but the danger that Cassandra might one day try to exploit his absence. I carefully returned everything to the box, setting aside only what I needed: copies of Adam's medical records, his legitimate will, and selected entries from his journal. Then I called James Wilson and arranged an appointment for that afternoon. James's office occupied a converted brownstone in downtown Boston, the kind of place that radiated old money, quiet authority, and absolute discretion. I had only visited a handful of times with Adam, but the receptionist recognized me instantly. Her face softened with sympathy. "Mrs. Preston," she said, rising to greet me, "Mr. Wilson is expecting you. Please accept my condolences for your loss." James Wilson himself was in his 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses perpetually balanced on the bridge of his nose. He had once been Adam's mentor when Adam first joined the firm, and their friendship had endured even after Adam moved to a different practice. When I entered his office, he stood, came around the desk, and pulled me into a brief but heartfelt embrace. Bridget, he said gently, gesturing toward a chair. I was devastated to hear about Adam. He was one of the good ones. He was, I managed, my voice catching. I drew a steadying breath. And it seems he was also right to prepare for the worst with my sister. I explained everything that had happened at the birthday party, sliding across the forged will Cassandra had flaunted. James examined it in silence, his brows knitting tighter with each line he read. When he finally looked up, his expression was grim. This is an amateurish forgery, James said at last, setting the document down with distaste. The phrasing is sloppy, and while the signature bears some resemblance to Adam's, it would never withstand expert scrutiny. What troubles me most is that she attempted this at all. I then produced the documents from the safety deposit box, the notarized will, Adam's medical records confirming the vasectomy, and his journal meticulously cataloging Cassandra's behavior. James flipped through them slowly, nodding. Adam was nothing if not thorough, he remarked. These records alone dismantle her story. The vasectomy predates Lucas's conception by 2 years. It is biologically impossible for Adam to be the father. What should I do? I asked quietly. I don't want to humiliate her in front of everyone, but I can't let her take half our home with a lie. James leaned back, fingers steepled, and regarded me thoughtfully. First, we need to understand her motive. Fraud of this scale doesn't happen without pressure, usually financial. I suggest we bring in a private investigator to look into her current situation. Frank Delaney is a former detective I've trusted for years. He does a great deal of work for the firm. I agreed, and James picked up the phone, briefing Frank in careful, broad strokes. An hour later, Frank Delaney arrived, a stocky man with a faint Boston accent and a no-nonsense air. He carried a battered notebook, which he opened the moment he sat down. He listened intently as I explained the situation, jotting down rapid notes and pressing me with pointed questions about Cassandra's relationships, her jobs, her finances. It struck me then how little I truly knew about my sister anymore. Since Lucas's birth, we had drifted further apart. My offers of help as an aunt increasingly brushed off, or taken for granted. I'll need a few days, Frank said when I finished. My first priority will be her finances and the child's actual father. Is there anything else you can tell me about him? I shared what little I knew about Tyler, the bartender Cassandra had been dating when she became pregnant. I only met him a handful of times. He never seemed interested in family gatherings. As far as I know, they're still together. But she hardly ever mentions him now. And he wasn't at the party yesterday, which struck me as odd for the father of the birthday boy. Frank nodded, jotting another note. That's a good starting point. I'll be in touch. 3 days later, he called, asking me to meet at James's office. When I arrived, both men were seated at the conference table, reviewing a stack of documents spread between them. Mrs. Preston, Frank began, his tone grave. I've uncovered some troubling information about your sister. According to his investigation, Cassandra was drowning in debt, over $75,000 spread across credit cards, personal loans, and medical bills from Lucas's surgery for a heart defect shortly after birth. Her credit score was ruined, and in the past month alone, she had been denied 3 separate loan applications. She's also facing eviction, Frank continued, sliding a paper toward me. This is a copy of the notice her landlord filed last week. She has until the end of the month to pay 4 months of back rent or leave the property. As for Tyler, he had abandoned Cassandra and Lucas shortly after Lucas was born, moving to Seattle with a new girlfriend. He contributed almost nothing, sporadic child support payments of barely $200 a month. And then there's this, Frank said, producing a set of printouts. Text messages Cassandra exchanged with a friend named Jenna, the same woman who answered the door at the party. The words on the page made my stomach turn. Adam's death is terrible, but maybe it's finally my chance to get what I deserve. That house is worth at least $800K now. If I play this right, I'll have a nice nest egg for Lucas and me. The will is almost ready. My friend Dave is good with Photoshop and found a sample of Adam's signature online from some charity auction. It looks totally legit. Bridget has always been the golden child. Time for me to get my share. She got 11 years with a great guy. The least she can do is share the wealth now that he's gone. I felt physically sick as I read the cold calculation in my sister's words. This wasn't mere desperation. It was premeditated fraud, crafted to exploit my grief and Adam's death. There's more, Frank said gently. I ran a background check on Tyler Martin, the actual father. He has a history of domestic violence charges from a previous relationship and currently has an active warrant for unpaid child support in New Hampshire. He's not someone you'd want anywhere near your nephew. I sat frozen, my mind reeling. My sister wasn't just desperate. She was willing to drag Adam's name through the mud, to dismantle the truth of our marriage, all to escape her financial ruin. Worse still, her choice of partner had put Lucas in a dangerous, unstable situation. What do I do with all of this? I asked finally, glancing between James and Frank. I can't just expose it all. Lucas is innocent. He's still my nephew. James removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You have options, Bridget. We could press charges against Cassandra for attempted fraud and forgery. Given the amount involved, she'd likely face criminal penalties, possibly even jail time. He paused, watching my expression, then softened his tone. Or we could handle it privately, confront her with the evidence, compel her to retract her claims, and work out an arrangement that protects both you and the child. I left the meeting with a folder full of evidence and a heart weighed down with conflict. That evening, I called my therapist, Dr. Laurel Chen, whom I had been seeing since Adam's death, and scheduled an emergency session. In her serene, plant-filled office, I let it all spill out. I'm so angry I can barely see straight, I confessed. But Lucas is just a baby. None of this is his fault. And despite everything, Cassandra is still my sister. Dr. Chen listened quietly, asking gentle questions about my history with Cassandra. Finally, she observed, "It sounds like this dynamic of competition and manipulation has been present since childhood. What's happening now is an escalation, not an exception." "What would you do?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I can't make that choice for you," she replied, "but I will say this. Compassion does not mean allowing yourself to be victimized. You can be kind without surrendering your boundaries or the consequences of her actions." After hours of reflection, I reached a decision. I would confront Cassandra privately, laying out all the evidence. She would have a choice: face legal consequences for fraud and forgery, or accept a compromise, one that secured Lucas's well-being while holding her accountable for the damage she had tried to cause. With renewed determination, I called Cassandra the next morning. "We need to talk about the will," I said when she answered. "Can you come to my house tomorrow afternoon? Just you. No Lucas." "I knew you'd come around," she replied smugly. "I'll be there at 2. I spent the morning preparing, arranging the documents in careful order, and following James's advice about setting up a recorder. Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state, he had reminded me. You can't record secretly, but you can ask her permission under the guise of creating a mutual record. That way, whatever happens is preserved. At exactly 2:00, the doorbell rang. I drew a steadying breath and opened the door. Cassandra stood on the porch, polished in a new outfit, radiating confidence. "Come in," I said, leading her to the living room. 2 chairs faced each other across a low table. On it sat a recorder, 2 glasses of water, and a neat folder of documents. "I hope you don't mind if we record our conversation. Given the legal nature of this discussion, it seems prudent." She hesitated only a beat before nodding. "Sure, whatever makes you comfortable. Honestly, I think this can be straightforward." The will is clear. I pressed the button, stating the date, time, and Cassandra's verbal consent to the recording. Then I leaned back, studying her carefully. Before we get into the will, I began evenly, I want to hear, in your own words, exactly what you are claiming happened between you and Adam. Cassandra launched into a smooth, well-rehearsed tale of a supposed affair 2 years ago. She spoke with feigned remorse but a practiced confidence, her voice steady as she painted herself as both victim and reluctant truth-teller. According to her version, she and Adam had connected during a time when he and I were supposedly having problems that never existed. She claimed they had met several times at a downtown hotel, that Adam had confessed his unhappiness in our marriage, and that Lucas was conceived during one of those encounters. He always meant to tell you, she said, her eyes wide with manufactured sincerity. But when Lucas was born with the heart condition, he didn't want to add more stress. He promised me he would provide for his son, though. I listened in silence, cataloging the holes in her story, the contradictions with Adam's actual schedule during that time. When she finished, I leaned forward. "Which hotel did you meet at?" I asked. "The Mandarin Oriental," she answered without hesitation. "And the room number?" She faltered. "It was on a high floor. I don't remember the exact number." "What days of the week did you usually meet?" "Tuesdays, sometimes Thursdays. He told you he was working late," she said quickly. I pressed further, my questions more pointed. "What did Adam usually order from room service? Which side of the bed did he prefer? Did he shower before or after?" These were the kinds of intimate details only someone truly close to Adam would know. Cassandra's composure cracked. Her answers grew vague, inconsistent, defensive. Finally, she snapped. "Why does any of this matter? The point is, Lucas is Adam's son, and the will proves Adam wanted to provide for him." "Actually," I said evenly, sliding open the folder beside me, "both of those claims are demonstrably false." I placed the first document, the medical records, on the table between us. 2 years before Lucas was conceived, Adam underwent a vasectomy after surgery for a varicocele. The procedure was completely successful, confirmed by follow-up testing. It was medically, biologically impossible for him to father a child after that point. Cassandra's face drained of color. She picked up the medical records with trembling hands, scanning the sterile dates and clinical language. "These could be faked," she said weakly. "They're not," I replied. "And Adam's doctor is prepared to testify to their authenticity if necessary. But that's only the beginning." I laid down the next document, the legitimate will, notarized and properly filed with the court. This is Adam's actual will, prepared by James Wilson and witnessed by 2 partners at his firm. As you can see, everything is left to me. There is no mention of Lucas. Cassandra's composure wavered, though she tried to rally. "He must have changed it after this one. The will I have is more recent." "The will you have," I said evenly, "is a forgery, and a clumsy one at that. James has already identified multiple legal inconsistencies in the language, and the signature wouldn't fool an amateur, let alone a handwriting expert. Forging a will is a felony in Massachusetts, punishable by up to 5 years in prison." One by one, I set down the rest of the evidence: Adam's journal, meticulously recording her advances, the text messages with Jenna outlining her plan, and finally, Frank's investigative report, her financial collapse, the eviction notice, Tyler's abandonment. "We know everything," I said quietly as she sat frozen in her chair. "The only question now is what happens next." For a long moment, silence stretched between us. Then, to my surprise, Cassandra broke down. Not the theatrical tears I'd seen her wield like a weapon with our parents, but deep, shaking sobs that left her gasping for air. "I didn't know what else to do," she choked out. I'm going to be homeless. Lucas and I will be on the street in 2 weeks. Tyler left us with nothing. The medical bills never stop. I thought, if I could just get some money from the house. So you decided to destroy Adam's reputation? I demanded, my voice sharpening. To stand in front of our family and claim he cheated on me? To forge legal documents? I was desperate, she shouted back, her grief curdling into anger. You have everything. This big house, a thriving business, everyone's respect. And what do I have? A sick baby, $75,000 in debt, and an eviction notice. You try making good choices in that situation. Her outburst hung in the air like smoke. For the first time, stripped of manipulation and self-pity, her words rang raw and real. It didn't bring forgiveness, at least not yet, but for the first time, I felt the faint stirrings of understanding. Lucas is Tyler's son, isn't he? I asked gently. Cassandra nodded, swiping at her tears. Yes. Adam never touched me. Not like that. I did try with him years ago, but he always shut me down immediately. He was annoyingly loyal to you. And the will? My friend Dave helped me make it. He does graphic design and thought it would be easy to fake a signature. I only meant to pressure you into giving me money. I never thought you'd dig so deep. I clicked off the recorder and sat back, weighing my next words. Cassandra shifted uneasily, bracing for the blow. I could press charges, I said at last. What you did was not only illegal, it was cruel, calculated, and reckless. She nodded miserably. But that would also hurt Lucas, I went on. And despite everything, he's my nephew. I love him. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell everyone the truth. That you lied about the affair. That Lucas is not Adam's son. And that you forged the will. You'll apologize publicly. To me. And to Adam's memory. And then what? She whispered. We'll still be evicted. I'm not finished, I said firmly. In exchange for a full confession and a signed legal agreement never to attempt anything like this again, I'll help you and Lucas. Not by giving you half my house, but by setting up a trust for Lucas's education and medical needs, and by helping you find stable housing. Her eyes widened. Why would you do that after what I did? Not for you, I said honestly. For Lucas. And because Adam would want me to protect his nephew, even if that nephew's mother tried to destroy his reputation. I didn't let her interrupt. There will be conditions. You'll attend therapy and financial counseling. You'll keep steady employment. And you'll allow me to be part of Lucas's life to make sure he's safe and cared for. Break any of these terms, and the support ends immediately. Cassandra sat in silence, her face pale and blotchy from tears. At last, she whispered, I don't deserve your help. No, I agreed quietly. You don't. But Lucas deserves stability, and I deserve to keep Adam's memory untarnished. This way, we both get what matters. After more discussion, she agreed to my terms. The following day, we would meet with James to formalize the agreement. And the next weekend, at a family dinner, Cassandra would stand before everyone and confess the truth. As I walked her to the door, Cassandra paused, her hand on the frame. I really am sorry, Bridget. I've been jealous of you my whole life. Everything always seemed to come so easily to you. Nothing about my life has been easy, I replied quietly. You just never cared to look past the surface. Maybe it's time you start. The family dinner that Saturday evening was tense from the moment it began. My parents arrived early, my mother carrying her signature lasagna like a peace offering. I don't know what this is about, she said as she set the dish on my counter. But Cassandra's been calling us in tears, saying you're forcing her into some kind of family meeting. Just wait until everyone is here, I told her, pouring a glass of wine. This needs to be addressed all at once. By 7 o'clock, we were gathered around my dining table, my parents, Cassandra, without Lucas, who was with a babysitter, and me. Following James's advice, I placed a small recorder in the center of the table and explained its purpose. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I've asked Cassandra to share some important information with you." I turned to her. "Cassandra." My sister looked pale, her usual bravado stripped away. She kept her eyes fixed on her plate as she spoke. "I lied about Lucas being Adam's son," she said, her voice barely audible. "Adam and I never had an affair. Lucas is Tyler's child, and I forged the will I showed at the birthday party." The room went still. My parents stared at her, their faces etched with shock. "Why would you do such a thing?" my father demanded at last. "Do you realize what that accusation did to your sister? To Adam's reputation?" Cassandra launched into her explanation, describing the crushing debts, Tyler's abandonment, and the looming eviction. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, almost as if confessing lightened the burden. I watched my mother's expression shift from horror to pity. "Oh, honey," she murmured when Cassandra finished. "Why didn't you just come to us? You didn't need to invent such awful lies." "Would you have given me $400,000? Cassandra asked bluntly. "Because that's what I would have gotten if my plan had worked. Half the value of Bridget's house." "Of course we couldn't give you that kind of money," my father snapped. "But we could have helped with your rent, at least temporarily. Instead, you chose to betray your own sister, while she was mourning her husband." Cassandra's shoulders slumped. "I know it was wrong. Bridget has already made that abundantly clear. She has enough evidence to press charges if she wanted to." My mother turned to me, alarm flashing in her eyes. "You wouldn't do that to your own sister, would you, Bridget?" A surge of frustration welled up at her instinctive defense of Cassandra, even now. "I could," I said firmly. "What she did wasn't just immoral, it was illegal. Forgery and fraud are felonies." "But she's family," my mother insisted, "and she has Lucas to think about." "I'm family too," I shot back, my voice rising. "Your daughter, the one who just lost her husband and then had to defend his memory against false accusations of infidelity. Where was your concern for me in all this?" My father shifted uneasily in his seat. "Of course we care about you, Bridget. But Cassandra has always needed more help, more guidance." "And whose fault is that?" I demanded. "You've been bailing her out of her bad decisions her entire life. Maybe if you'd let her face consequences once in a while, she wouldn't have escalated to criminal behavior." My mother gasped. "That's hardly fair, Bridget. We've always treated you girls equally." To my surprise, Cassandra shook her head. "No, Mom. You haven't. Bridget's right. You always made excuses for me, always cleaned up my messes. It didn't help. It made me think I could do whatever I wanted without consequences." My parents stared at her, stunned. For perhaps the first time, Cassandra wasn't deflecting blame, she was owning it. "So what happens now?" my father asked at last, glancing between us. "Is Cassandra going to jail?" "No," I said. "I've decided not to press charges under certain conditions." I outlined the agreement we had formalized with James: the trust fund for Lucas's education and medical care, mandatory therapy and financial counseling, and the requirement that Cassandra maintain steady employment. "That's very generous," my father said with clear relief, "especially after what she did." "It's more than generous," Cassandra admitted quietly. "It's more than I deserve." "Well," my mother said brightly, as if eager to close the book on the ordeal, "then it's all working out for the best. Cassandra has apologized, Bridget is helping with Lucas, and we can put this ugly business behind us." "It's not that simple, Mom," I said firmly. "Trust has been broken. Healing will take time, if it happens at all. And there need to be boundaries moving forward." Her smile faded. "What kind of boundaries?" she asked, worried. For one, I said, meeting both their eyes, you need to stop enabling Cassandra. No more bailouts, no more excuses. If she's going to change, she has to stand on her own 2 feet, with support that builds responsibility, not dependency. And I need you to understand, I continued, that my relationship with Cassandra won't ever be the same. I'll stay involved in Lucas's life because I love him and want the best for him. But Cassandra and I will not be close. Not for a long time, if ever. My mother looked stricken. But we're family. We need to stick together, especially now. I shook my head gently. Being family doesn't mean tolerating abuse, Mom. What Cassandra did was abusive. She tried to exploit my grief, to take advantage of me at my weakest moment. That has consequences, even in a family. The rest of the dinner passed in subdued silence, my parents struggling to absorb the reality of this new dynamic. When they finally left, my father hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Bridget. Adam would be too." My mother hugged me as well, but her eyes were mournful, already grieving the idealized family harmony she had always pretended we had. Cassandra lingered until last. At the door, she hesitated. "I really am sorry," she said softly. "Not just for the will and the lies, but for everything. For the years of jealousy and competition. For never being the sister you deserved." "I know," I replied. "And I hope therapy helps you understand why you've made these choices. Lucas deserves a mother who is emotionally healthy and honest." Her voice trembled. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I considered carefully before answering. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'm willing to see where this new path takes us, for Lucas's sake, and maybe, one day for ours too." The drive home with my parents was silent, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. One truth settled heavily in my chest. Our family would never be the same, but perhaps, in time, it could become something healthier, built on honesty rather than illusion. A year after Adam's death, I stood in our garden, watching spring bulbs break through the soil. The daffodils Adam had planted the previous fall were in full bloom. A riot of yellow splashed across the fresh green lawn. A bittersweet ache stirred in me, knowing he had placed them there with the quiet expectation of seeing them blossom. So much had changed in a year. The trust fund for Lucas was established and already easing the burden of his medical expenses. His heart condition, though requiring careful monitoring, was responding well to treatment, and he was blossoming into a bright, curious toddler. Cassandra had surprised everyone by honoring the conditions of our agreement. 6 months of therapy helped her recognize lifelong patterns, the constant need to compete with me, the self-sabotage woven through so many of her choices. She had found steady work as an office manager at a dental practice, a position that gave her both stability and benefits. Our relationship remained formal but civil. I saw Lucas often, taking him to the park or the children's museum. Cassandra and I no longer pretended to be close, but we had forged a truce of sorts, coexisting peacefully for Lucas's sake. My parents struggled at first with the new boundaries I had drawn. My mother especially found it hard to accept that her daughters would never share the closeness she had always dreamed of. But in time, even they adjusted, learning how to support Cassandra without enabling her dependency. As for me, the grief support group I had joined shortly after Adam's death became a lifeline. 12 strangers bound by loss had become friends, understanding one another in ways that even the most well-meaning family and friends could not. We met weekly, sharing our journeys through grief, celebrating small victories, and holding one another through inevitable setbacks. 3 months after the confrontation with Cassandra, I founded the Adam Preston Foundation for Legal Education, offering scholarships to underprivileged students who aspired to study corporate law. It gave me purpose. ensuring Adam's legacy lived on through young, idealistic lawyers who might never have had the chance otherwise. Old friends stepped up in ways I could never have imagined. Adam's former colleagues checked in regularly, inviting me to dinners and events, making sure I wasn't swallowed by loneliness. My college roommate Sarah flew in from Chicago every month just to spend weekends with me, sometimes doing nothing more than watching movies and ordering takeout, which was exactly what I needed. And then there was Michael. I met him at a fundraiser for the foundation 6 months after Adam's passing. A professor of ethics at Boston University, he was thoughtful, kind, and carried a quiet humor that reminded me of Adam, though he was very much his own person. We started as friends, sharing coffee after board meetings, which gradually grew into dinners. It was different from what I had with Adam, as it should be. Michael understood that Adam would always be part of me, and that moving forward didn't mean erasing the past. We were taking things slowly, both of us cautious but quietly hopeful. Standing in the garden that spring morning, surrounded by the daffodils Adam had planted, I reflected on everything he had taught me, not just in life, but even in death. His foresight in preparing those documents had protected me at my most vulnerable. His journal entries had validated my experiences with Cassandra when even my own parents tried to dismiss them. His love continued to shield me, even in his absence. Through this ordeal, I had learned hard but necessary lessons, that family relationships only remain healthy when bounded by clear lines, that documentation is not merely a legal safeguard, but sometimes an emotional one, that forgiveness does not require forgetting or permitting harmful patterns to continue, and that, heartbreakingly, the very people we expect to protect us are sometimes the ones we most need protection from. I had also discovered my own resilience. I faced Cassandra's betrayal, navigated the legal complexities, and made painful choices about the path forward, all while carrying the raw weight of losing Adam. Somehow, I had found a way to honor his memory while beginning to craft a life beyond my grief. The daffodils swayed gently in the spring breeze, resilient after the long winter. Grief, I realized, is like that too. Not a straight line, but a cycle of seasons, each with its own hardships and its own unexpected moments of beauty. I was no longer the woman I had been before Adam's death, before Cassandra's betrayal. Stronger in some ways, more guarded in others, but ultimately more authentic in how I approached relationships, loyalty, and boundaries. Sometimes, the most painful betrayals force us to uncover strengths we never imagined we had. I whispered to the garden Adam had loved. You couldn't have known what would happen after you were gone, but somehow you prepared me to face it. And in that way, your love protects me still. As I turned to go back inside, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in so long, not because the grief was gone, it never would be, but because I had learned to carry it alongside hope. That was Adam's final gift to me, the lesson that love endures even after the person is gone, and that preparation and honesty are themselves acts of profound love. If I could offer one truth to anyone facing betrayal within their family, it would be this: protect yourself, with documentation, with boundaries, with unflinching clarity. Those who truly love you will honor those boundaries, and those who don't were never safe to let inside them in the first place.